Well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, welcome to Women in Leadership. I am Ann Quiello, and I am directing this year's Women in Leadership seminar series. I'm also a senior consultant at TurkNet Leadership Group, as well as an executive and leadership development coach. With me today, co-hosting will be Kathy Igu, who is our Vice President of Operations here at TurkNet. But I'm most excited to introduce to you Tisha Tallman, who is our guest today. Tisha is the Executive Director of the National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth, or NAEHCY. NAEHCY is a national nonprofit membership organization, and they serve the liaisons with the homeless, advocates, and educators who in turn serve the needs of 1.3 million homeless children and youth in our public schools throughout the United States. And I imagine that that number has grown. You are an attorney, formerly served in other nonprofit organizations as a leader. For example, you've been the president and CEO of the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Southeast Regional Director of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and also the volunteer state director of the League of United Latin American Citizens. And it was in these roles that you served as an attorney and or public policy advocate, litigating in federal and state courts, testifying, speaking, and writing on a number of public policy issues throughout the Southeast. You have been quoted and appeared in a number of international news outlets, such as the BBC, Japanese print media, Mexico City newspapers and radio, as well as the US media like MSNBC, CBS Evening News, Fox News, NPR, Court TV, Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, and several state and local media. And now you can add Women in Leadership to that list. Your esteemed professional history also includes attending several global forums on race relations and serving on a number of boards, commissions, committees, and roundtables, some at the behest of the White House under former President Obama and the former President of Mexico, Vicente Fox. And by the way, while doing all this, you also served as adjunct faculty at 2 law schools and a technical college, as well as served as a part-time municipal judge. Phew. Equally impressive, Tisha has a notable list of awards, honors, and recognitions. She received the Inspiring Woman Award by the WNBA team, our own Atlanta Dream, which has been in the news a lot lately. Also won the NFL Hispanic Heritage Leadership Award by the Atlanta Falcons, the YMCA Women of Achievement Award, Regional Advocate of the Year by the Minority Business Development Agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce. You were listed among the 100 most influential Atlantans by the Atlanta Business Chronicle, the Game Changer Award by Spelman College, Superwoman by the Atlanta Tribune, and your team received the Outley Award from the Mexican government, which they give to those who promote the Mexican culture and assist Mexican citizens working in the US, as I understand it. And you've earned several degrees. You have a BA in political science and a BA in journalism and mass communication from the University of Iowa. My family's from Iowa, by the way. A law degree from the University of Iowa's College of Law with distinction. An MBA from our own Emory University, the Goisetas Business School, and with honors. And you are also certified in blockchain technology, which I found fascinating, from the Blockchain Academy at Berkeley Law, as well as in full stack flex web development from Georgia Tech Department of Professional Education. So it seems like continuous learning and growth is a real theme here for you, and what perhaps defines you. And you're also the mother of a talented young woman attending SCAD And I understand that in your spare time, you like to run. She actually ran this morning before coming here. So it was fun to see the artwork the other day behind you. And so it is still there, I see. And to find out that she's the artist. You are the artist of the artwork behind her. So what an honor it is to hear from you today. And so I'm going to ask some series of questions to facilitate and guide the discussion, but I want to invite the audience, please, to enter into chat any questions you have. And Barbara will gather those questions and we'll have a chance to hear from the rest of the audience towards the end. So hear what's on their minds. But the title of our topic today is a multifaceted career leadership with a purpose. But before we get into the kind of purpose that's propelled your leadership, it'd be interesting to go back to how you grew up and how your growing up experiences and maybe the significant people in your life, in your early life, has shaped who you are. So
Sure.
With that question, welcome, Tisha, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Anne and Kathy and Susan Hitchcock who got me involved. And thank you to TurkNet Leadership for having me here today. And I certainly hope that I can leave you all with a little something that you can take with you. So please do ask those questions. I want to make sure everybody gets a little something from today. I know that we're all busy and you all are very accomplished women in your own right. And I look forward to learning from all of you at some point as well. So I think, there are some, like all of us, there are certain things in our lives that happen and ways that we grew up and things we were exposed to in our experiences that really guide who we are as a human being. And for me, it's always been service, right? So at a young age, service was ingrained in me. I truly believe that we are on this earth just to help each other. And
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing else, just helping each other. So growing up in a blue collar family, my father worked in factories his whole life. I think that played a very integral role in who I am today. I mean, he was a part of a union, so we had the stability of being in a union job, a lot of what doesn't exist today. But yet we also had the instability of my father being in a union job. So, I remember strikes, I remember layoffs. I remember both my parents being laid off. I remember the uncertainty surrounding that. And I think, I was one of the children that always picked up on what everybody was thinking and feeling and able to, understand their lens as much as my own lens as a child growing up in certain environments. I'm Mexican American. My mother is Mexican. My father is white. I think that by ethnic brain also steers me because I can see my privilege, but I can also see my disadvantage and how that's played out. A person who's biracial or biethnic truly sees differences even with their own families, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does everyone accept you in your family? Is everyone in your family treated the same inside the family and outside the family in society?
Mm-hmm.
And so, certain things happened throughout my childhood that really stuck
Mm-hmm.
with me as unfair, unjust. And, that coupled with the service background really shaped who I am and the need to want to change things, fix things.
Yes.
I think as women too, we want to fix things, right? But then when we experience things in life, we want to make it better. We want to make it more comfortable. It doesn't have to be so hard. People in our lives don't have to struggle. And so I think that was very important. I was raised Catholic, and the Catholic education is a very integral part of who I am also. I mean, there are still things that I do that I think started from my childhood. I remember the nuns would make us write on the top of our papers JMJ or the Christ symbol. We dedicated every single thing we did in our work to a higher being.
Wow.
And I think that, that's the way I want to live my life. I always want to dedicate what I'm doing to something other than myself, something other
Yes.
than my family, something that benefits community and society. I was
Mhm.
also raised in a household that was very political, because my father was in the union, and my mother, neither of my parents, when I was growing up, had a college education. So my generation was first college going. And but my father went on much later in his late 40s and went back to school.
Wow.
And but we had, we sat around the dinner table, when it wasn't crazy and we got older and everybody was every which way. And both my parents were working. But when I was younger, we would talk about politics at the table. We always had the newspaper, we had the news on. My mom was very politically involved. She allowed me to skip school to go to political rallies because I asked. Um, so all of that, I know that's a lot of experiences, but it's a culmination of that I think really propelled me into, the purpose of service,
Mhm.
and knowing what's going on in your neighborhood, your community, your state, your country, the world.
Yes. So, and first of all, I'm having a hard time hearing you, Tisha. So either speak closer to the mic. I don't know if it's having the same effect out with our group, but just in case, just in case. So what would you say then were the key messages that you got from your parents around that helped you to define your purpose? You mentioned that there was a lot of hardship, there was a lot of political discussion and enabling you to go to political um, um, affairs and so on. But what would you say were the key messages that you got from all of that?
I think, uh, I had a lot of privilege. I want to put that out there. I was working class. Um, so, our struggles weren't constant. Our struggles were regular,
Mhm.
working class family in a working class neighborhood. Um, I learned from them, sacrifice,
Mm.
um, whether it's sacrifice for your family or sacrifice for community or sacrifice for whatever you're involved in. Um, but through service, right?
Mhm.
So sacrifice, I don't even know if there's a word, because sacrifice I don't think is the correct word, because sacrifice I think involves like pain or like a trade-off.
Mhm.
And when you believe your life is driven by service, then there is no pain. It's giving up for a greater good. It's because that greater good will come back and lift you up too.
I see. Yeah. So you're very fortunate in that those messages were so clear, and so as a consequence, it sounds like it has really driven your purpose. So let's get to that. How do you then describe your purpose that that has now propelled you into the various roles of service that you've held?
Yeah. Well, again, I truly believe we're all just here to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
And and over time that's evolved. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I have a certain skill set and it's evolved over time. And
Mm-hmm.
so my roles have evolved over time and my thinking has expanded over time. So, even, my first job, I was an assistant attorney general with the Minnesota Attorney General's office under Hubert Humphrey III.
Mm-hmm.
And my first job was an environmental attorney. But there was a civil rights working group committee that advised Hubert Humphrey III on issues of civil rights. And so I was asked to be a part of that. So even though my work was environmental, I found ways to be involved in those issues that spoke to me and were personal to me, that I could utilize my skill set. And then I went off and I taught English as a second language in Guadalupe Area Project, was in West St. Paul, a large Mexican immigrant area. And so, you know, even when your job, you know, even when I was starting out and my job wasn't specifically in what I've been propelled to be in now, I found other ways
Mm-hmm.
to service through
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So at times, the service that I believe that I was driven to or had a calling for was volunteer at times. It was
Mm-hmm.
time at times, but it was always a part. It was always a constant.
Yes.
So those were the, you know, in the beginning, that's where my skill set was. And then eventually, you know, the skill set changed, right? So I really feel like one of the pivotal points was working at the Institute in Race and Poverty under John Powell, who's now at Berkeley. And we did a lot of work at the intersection of race, ethnicity, and poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a turning point where I realized that I had the skill set and the experience to be able to work on issues of greater impact, not just tangentially. And then my skill set kept changing, right? So then once I was there, then I got a call from the then general counsel of MALDEF, Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and ended up opening an office, a regional office in Atlanta. And they were all very pivotal times too, right? So when I was at the Institute of Race and Poverty, racial profiling was really at the forefront with police departments looking at changing policies, and then multicultural coalitions, coalition building, different groups based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic circumstances. I worked on that. That was a very pivotal time. And then 9/11 happened. And you know, immigration that we were working on then went into retrenchment. So there have been all these, like, along the way, my experiences and my skill set, and then these pivotal life things, right? 9/11 was pivotal. The global financial crisis was pivotal when I was at the chamber. And the pandemic is pivotal now while I'm serving those that serve our children and youth experiencing homelessness.
So this value that you have around service has certainly has been a theme throughout every opportunity that has come your way, is what I'm hearing. So if you had to choose just one victory that you felt had the most impact in all that you've done, what is it, and why would you choose that one?
Yeah, I've given this a lot of thought, Anne. There have been a lot of things that I am so proud of, what my team and I were able to achieve at that particular point for different reasons. And it's interesting that I'm going to pick this one because it wasn't a victory in the sense that other people would consider a victory, but it had the biggest impact. And that was the litigation that I worked on in the federal district court in Virginia, with the Dreamers, which they weren't called the Dreamers at the time. So I was working on, simultaneously, I was working on advocating for the federal legislation that was the DREAM Act, what we've come to know as the Dreamers and the DREAM Act. And we had started litigation to assist students in Virginia who weren't allowed to go to college in any Virginia college based on their immigration status. So it had a big dragnet of excluding students who were varying immigration status. undocumented, had temporary protective status, were seeking asylum. But it was just a flat mandate from the then Attorney General in Virginia, where the students wouldn't be able to go on to college. And
Wow.
so we worked on the litigation for about a year and a half. And literally, we were in people's homes and in community centers and churches learning about these amazing students who we later called the Dreamers. But they came from various parts of Mexico. They came from various parts of Central America. They came from real political strife, poverty, civil wars, natural disasters. And they were brought here by their parents at a very young age. And some of them didn't speak Spanish. Some of them had absolutely no roots to their country of origin, yet they were faced with potentially being deported.
Yeah.
And so we represented students who were 17, 16, 15 years old in various high schools throughout Virginia. And the litigation actually got dismissed on summary judgment after motions for a good year and depositions. On the eve of the summary judgment motion, 2 Virginia colleges, before any decisions were made, changed their policies. And I truly believe it was because they heard firsthand from the students, and it wasn't this broad brush stroke of who these students were. They actually got to know intimately the details of these students, their amazing accomplishments, their stellar academic achievement, and the struggles that they've had to overcome in living in this country with this unknown immigration status and an unknown future. And then the plaintiffs in the case all were able to go to the college of their choice in Virginia. One student was not admitted in any of the ones who had denied access, but then turned around and got admitted to Johns Hopkins University.
Oh, wow.
And another, actually, I believe one of my plaintiffs is on this video call right now, Brian Marroquin, and I asked him to be able to say his name, but I've kept in contact with him over all these years. He called me when he was going to get his US citizenship. And then he called me when he graduated from college. And then he called me when he got a job with a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. And now this week, I'm writing a letter of recommendation for him to be admitted into Georgetown Public Policy Program. So
Wow.
the impact that we made during that time with the individual plaintiffs and some of the individual colleges and universities was huge, even though we didn't end up getting the result that we wanted. We also used the argument of federal preemption, which is the first time it was ever used in this context in federal litigation. So it was a novel federal case. I then appeared in other cases after that because it was used to combat all sorts of things that were happening in the immigrant community. And it was later used by the Obama administration to overturn the Arizona anti-immigration law. So
Wow.
that one case has had and continues to have an impact.
Yeah, and to me, the impact is certainly amazing and powerful for that particular generation of students. But imagine the generations to come, that from their children and their grandchildren, and what an impact that will make on them.
Yeah.
Just like the children that you're impacting today with the work that you're doing now. So that's amazing, absolutely amazing. Well, we've already mentioned that as I've just mentioned, that you're the executive director of NAEHCY, which is really intended to help the homeless children and youth to have equal access to quality education. And of course, this has got to be more important than ever at this point. I'm curious, what are you currently focused on in this particular area?
Right. Yeah, and thank you again for this opportunity to discuss this important work. Like you said, Anne, now more than ever, income inequality is just a huge issue for this generation and generations to come. And our children and youth and families experiencing homelessness is a significant number, and it's growing because of the pandemic. So as you mentioned, there are now 1.5 million children and youth experiencing homelessness in this country who are seeking public education. So what our organization is dedicated to is ensuring that there's access for those students to school, and ensuring that that access is equal to their peers. Because we know for a number of reasons, because they're experiencing homelessness, academic achievement is going to be more difficult because of the situation that they're in, but also we know that education is so much more important for them
Right.
to get them out of that circumstance and be able to thrive in the future. So, and we also know that of the 1.5 million children and youth experiencing homelessness, that a disproportionate number are children of color and children LGBTQ plus. So utilizing programs and services for those who directly service our children and youth is incredibly important to our mission. So one of the things we do, and what I want to mention first, and then I'll go into some other things, is that we have a national conference every year where we bring together homeless liaisons, foster care liaisons, and others who advocate and work with children and youth experiencing homelessness in our public schools and our charter schools from across the nation. So in a typical non-pandemic year, we do this in person. In 2019, we were in Washington, D.C., and we had 1,800 people from across the nation register for that conference. And because it was in D.C., we then had the opportunity for those advocating for the students to be able to speak with our U.S. senators. And I set up those visits for them while they were there. But the homeless liaisons, foster care liaisons, and those that advocate for the children and youth are from, in DC, there were 48 states, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Washington, DC. This year, because we had to go virtual, we had 2,200 attendees, and we had all 50 states, Puerto Rico, Guam, and Washington, DC. So we were very fortunate at that conference. It's a truly transformative experience where we bring in people with lived expertise in homelessness that talk about where they were in life, where they are in life today, those who advocate, those who do research in this area to assist the advocates in their work. It really brings them together. They receive continuing education credit if they're social workers, and they're allowed to exchange best practices. So we try to bring together the best of the best and provide all these sessions, about 80 sessions, to the attendees. This year, we have the great pleasure, both my president of the board of directors and myself are in Atlanta. So we have the great pleasure of bringing it to Atlanta. We are planning on both an in-person and a virtual event because we know that some people still won't be able to travel come November. And the information is going to be provided later. If any of you are so moved, it is a truly moving experience to be a part of this. And we have volunteers and we have sponsors and attendees. But to be able to bring it here, we're going to be able to lift up Atlanta and all of those individuals and organizations that work with our children and youth experiencing homelessness, but also to bring it here to Atlanta. And it's going to be at the Hyatt Regency. It has a very rich history in civil rights and supporting the civil rights community. And that racial lens is so important because of who the children and youth experiencing homelessness are. It's with great pleasure that we're going to be doing that this year. But then we also do scholarships. And one of my board members is, I see on the call, Jolanda Burton. She's also the chair of our scholarship committee. And what we do is we collect donations, and 100% of what we collect goes straight to the student who's experiencing homelessness and is pursuing college.
Mm.
So we have that award ceremony at the conference as well. We do other professional development throughout the year. Because of the pandemic, there's been a big pivot, right? So we went from having a plan of doing various webinars on various topics to pivoting to the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was a rush to bring all the resources together, all the data, everything that we could possibly bring together and provide that information to our advocates. One of the first issues that arose early in the pandemic was, okay, now that schools are closed, how are students going to be fed? We know that in our schools, we're not just educating our children, but we're also feeding our children. We're also providing tutoring. We're also providing before school and after school activities. And so all of those resources were gone like that when schools closed. So we had advocates rallying and we pulled together all of their information from across the country to help others navigate. So we found that people were bringing private entities with the schools in order to deliver food, in order to get Wi-Fi. All sorts of innovative things were happening and happening fast as the problems were rising. So first it was food, then it was internet and Wi-Fi, and it was technology. Then it was tutoring, then it was space. Where are these children going to go to study? Who's going to assist them with their work? And so it's just been one thing after the next. Now evictions. When we were up against the December 31st and on the federal eviction moratorium, all the advocates were concerned, what are our families going to do? And then it was extended to January 31, and just on the 20th, President Biden signed an executive order that now it's extending it to at least March 31st.
Right.
So it's that constant rolling out of information and the fluidity of the pandemic and how it keeps changing and raising new issues and barriers. There are families and children and youth who are falling through the cracks. There are advocates that are losing contact with their families because they are displaced. They're mobile. They've had to move because of the pandemic. When shelters closed for a while, extended stay hotels closed. You couldn't go to campgrounds for a while. So there's going to be many years ahead of some really hard work. And it's not only the students who were experiencing homelessness prior to the pandemic, but that whole new group of children and families who are now experiencing homelessness because they've been displaced, because their parents have lost their jobs. And we just don't know how long that will be rolling out. At least the next 5 to 10 years is going to look very different.
Wow. Tisha, it almost sounds overwhelming. How do you manage?
Well, I am very fortunate to be able to use my skills and my talents to assist the people who are on the ground. I'm not on the ground. And, one of the things that we've really taken into account is self-care, right? So one of the things that we brought early on in the pandemic were some self-care sessions to our advocates because they are, not only are they worried about their own families and getting the pandemic, in Cobb County, we just lost 3 teachers.
Yes.
2 of them we lost yesterday. So they're in the schools if they're face-to-face, or they're virtual, struggling with virtual. They have their own personal issues, and then they also have the issues of their students and their students' families. So they're under a tremendous amount of stress. So we started bringing yoga and meditation. Some of the sessions, we also added it to our virtual conference this year. I do think that we'll be doing more of that. I know that I'm engaging in self-care as well. And I know there were a lot of questions about family, work, life balance. It's always been a challenge. I've been a single mom for most of my career. And so even, it's those small things that are unnoticed that, days of the week or start times or finish times. And, single moms really struggle. I'm fortunate to be in positions of leadership where I've got some flexibility that other single moms don't.
Wow.
But there are a lot of things that you can't take advantage of because of that. Um, so work-life balance has been very tricky as a single mom, but now my child's an adult. Um, she's here now because of the virtual world in which we're living in with the pandemic, which is very, very difficult for her because she's starting out her young adulthood. But yeah, that work-life balance is a tricky thing. All I can say advice wise is you have to figure out what works for you. You can't, even though some work is life work, like my work, it's life work. You have to take care of yourself. You have to love yourself. What is it that works for you? For me, it's running. I'm trying to incorporate mindfulness now into my week. I'm not very successful at it right now, but I keep trying. But I also, creativity is incredibly important. Everybody is creative. I know that, people say, oh, I'm not creative, I'm not crafty, I'm not that. It's not true. We started kindergarten or pre-K or wherever you started, you drew pictures. We all are creative beings, whatever that means. And it doesn't have to be the perfect anything, so I draw, I knit, I crochet. Some of it, like I've been finding I knit and crochet more because it's mindless to me. My body just does it. So my mind can float and my mind can rest and my mind can do whatever it wants, but my body is busy. But you absolutely have to take that time. I remember being so busy at one point of my career, and my daughter was so small and I was a single mom. I swore to my dentist that I didn't see for 7 years, I cannot floss my teeth. I do not have time to floss my teeth. My, my, my dentist looked at me like I was crazy, but my hygienist completely understood me. And she said, floss it in the shower, wash your teeth in the shower. And I'm like, I can do that. I can do that. So it's, I know that's making light of a situation that people are really struggling with, but we just have to you got to find that time and the space that you have, and I found that waking up early was the only time that I could have a little bit of peace, a half hour, 15 minutes.
Yes. Yeah. And I pointed out early on your artwork behind you, and you mentioned to me when we last met that you actually started drawing in 2011, so not too long ago. What prompted you to start drawing?
I don't really know. I know my daughter's extremely creative and she's an artist. And I think her drawing and her exploring her creativity, she found some old drawings of mine in a box, which I completely had forgotten about. Like, this is kind of good. So I goof around with it. It's very healing for me. All I do are faces. But faces of people I admire or just interesting faces.
Yeah.
And it's very calming for me.
Good.
And that's why I do.
The brain, when it's in its task mode, it's like a horse with the blinders on, so that they stay totally focused on the road ahead. Well, that's the brain in its task mode. And what you've described is when we take those blinders off and let the horse roam freely in the big field. Just kind of let your brain take a rest and be creative and find its restoration. So that's great. That's fantastic. Great tip around being creative. And so I would invite the audience, in fact, if you would put into chat how you are creative. What kinds of creative outlets have you found that helps you to restore? So back to the crisis and some of the leadership lessons that you might have learned through this time. How has managing through this particular crisis shaped your leadership going forward?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm at the age where a lot of stuff starts happening in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who helped me throughout my career or made introductions are passing on and retiring. And that's true of my family too. Before the pandemic, a family member got ill. And so my perspective was starting to change. And I think that comes naturally with age as things start changing in your own personal life.
Mm-hmm.
But that coupled with the pandemic, I think perspective is a big word that I go back to with the pandemic. And I think we were all put on pause.
Mm.
And, for good or bad. And there's been a lot of loss of life. And, I want to acknowledge that we're all going through different things, and the pandemic means different things to all of us. But we are surrounded by a lot of loss. I think some of us are more than others. So I think at the end of the day, we realized that some of the things that we were doing pre-pandemic don't need to be done. Some of the things that we weren't doing need to be done. So, and I think it's all different for all of us because we all have different lives. But perspective is a huge one.
Yes.
Really, literally don't sweat the small stuff.
Yes.
And when you have it bad, and it could be really bad,
Yes.
losing loved ones and illness, and you don't have to look further to see someone else who has it.
Yes.
And worse and worse and worse. And so again, we go back to, we're just here to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we get through it. And that's how we lift each other up.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm hearing also a sense of gratitude.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In that perspective and how you form your perspective.
Absolutely. So, even in the darkest days, you need to wake up and say thank you. And maybe it's thank you, I woke up today. Maybe thank you, I have shelter.
Yes.
Maybe thank you, I don't have to worry about my next meal today.
Right.
And then move on.
Right. And do for one what you wish you could do for many. I heard that recently, but having that perspective, not being overwhelmed, I can only imagine just doing for one what you wish you could do for many.
Right.
Well, so from our chat, we're hearing lots of creativity that's going on. Anything with needles. Let's see, I've got the wrong mouse here. Let me see what else. Writing, journaling, reading, praying while walking, and internalizing all the reasons I have to be grateful. So yes, it's from our own Susan Hitchcock. I tend to be creative. Whoops. I just went down too far. Anything. Sorry about that. I went down too far.
Well, just a few more are cooking.
Oh, cooking. There you
go. Designing, training, decorating. Everybody's doing stuff at home, I hear.
Yes. Yeah. Anything with a needle and thread. I love that. Quilts, fiber, art, wall hangings, reading. That happens to be from a friend of mine. Designing, cooking and decorating, cooking. Yes. All right. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think that we miss that opportunity, and we do think of ourselves as not being creative, and so we don't even pursue it. But what a wonderful opportunity there is there just to take those blinders off. And so I thank you for that. The other thing that I failed to mention when we were talking about all the work you're doing at NAEHCY is how we can help, how any of us who may be listening in today, how can we help? What can we do? And we've got a link to the conference in the chat. And, how else can we help?
Yeah. So there's a donation link also. And like I said,
Okay.
we take donations for our scholarship fund. We have two types of scholarships. So one is for the student experiencing homelessness who wants to pursue college. So we give some scholarships for them going into college. And then our scholarship chair who's on the phone, she also started this continuing scholarship. So our scholars who continue in college and continue to have hardship, they can apply for a continuing scholarship. So continuing to lift them up as they pursue their college. And that donation link is on our website. Our website was provided. And like I said, 100% goes to the students. We don't take anything out, not a penny.
Okay, great. So those of you who are interested, certainly go ahead and access the links that we put into the chat so that you can get involved in some way, certainly, hopefully financially. So Tisha, a point of curiosity for me is I noted that you had pursued some additional certifications in technology. So lawyer, executive director, executive over multiple different nonprofits, and now technology. So help us to understand, how did you get involved with that kind of learning?
Yeah. So I went back and got my MBA not too long ago. I think I've only been out of my MBA cohort the last 3 years. I think 2018,
Mhm.
I graduated. So it was an 18-month program, and I was, there was a lot of trepidation, but like I had mentioned before, my father got his college education in his late 40s. So he was really kind of the impetus for me saying, I can get,
Mhm.
their graduate degree. It's not my college. I'm not going to be with college students. I'm going to be with people who are about my age. And so I had set up a scholarship program with Emory-Goizueta Business School for members of the Hispanic Chamber who wanted to pursue executive degrees. And through that program, and now I'm great friends with the former admissions person, Carolyn Grimes, and who she was maybe going to be on this call today. She and I worked to set up that program, and it increased the Hispanic enrollment at the Goizueta Business School significantly. It was a good success. And I was really concerned at the time, even with the scholarships, whether people would pursue it, but they did. So then one year she contacted me and she said, you may be interested in this cohort, you might want to apply. And I had talked to her before about how I was interested in Harvard leadership program. And, but I wasn't thinking of like a 2-year degree. So I applied and I got in, and they gave me a partial scholarship. And so I started pursuing the MBA, and it was all with nonprofit management and additional nonprofit business in mind. But then as I started getting involved in analytics and technology, I really, and when I was younger, I enjoyed math and science. It hit a part of me that I hadn't explored in a very long time. And I really enjoyed it. It scared the heck out of me, but it made me want to try harder. So I started delving into analytics and technology. My technology professor used to work at Apple. So he worked with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, back in the day, and he's just brilliant.
Mm.
Ben Kaczynski, and he's still at the Goizueta Business School, and I still talk to Ben. And so he started introducing us to all sorts of things. And one thing that really intrigued me, besides analytics, and I ended up doing more analytics too with the Harvard Business School, but was blockchain technology. And blockchain technology really intrigued me because there's a lot of talk around, and it's not completely developed, around incentivization. So, doing social good and people being incentivized to do social good through the blockchain. So for example, Berkeley, in Berkeley City Council, and I went to Berkeley to get my certification, the law school, they're using it to incentivize people on various things. So for example, water shortages. How do you get people to use less water, to um, you know, work their own water from the ocean? How do you tackle water shortage? And so one of the things that you can do is incentivize people.
Mm-hmm.
And blockchain technology allows you to do that by having things put on there, and they own things. So for example, I went to Estonia through the program. Estonia has universal health care where people own their health documents. They own everything, all their information, right? Which is very different from the United States, where we don't own any of our information. Everybody else has our information, and
Yes.
it's just
Right.
and it's used for various things. But in owning your information and controlling it, and the
Yes.
blockchain technology allows for that, then you can create all sorts of innovative solutions to problems that are occurring. And so that really intrigued me. I still go back from time to time and keep thinking about it. The pandemic and the economic crisis that we're in now has really stifled some of it, but in some ways it's propelled some of it to happen faster. So, when I talk about the pivot of the organization, one of the big pivots that all of us are facing is technology. And we had already started down that road. Some of it's because I brought some of it and wanted that technology integration because we are remote, and we were remote before the pandemic. But this has kind of expedited things.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was moving in that direction anyway, so it's kind of expedited all of that. But I don't think, because we're reacting to what's happening now and using technology for that, we still aren't being proactive in our thoughts of what technology can do to assist our nonprofits, to assist our problem solving. And blockchain technology is still in the back of my head in one of those ways that we can innovatively and creatively look to solving in a communal way, and in ways that, taxes scare everybody, right? When you incentivize people, you're not taxing them. Instead, people who want to do things are doing them and helping solve problems.
That is fascinating. So when I did my research around blockchain technology, it really was around securing information as well as utilized for things like Bitcoin and some sort of currency, right? Using it to secure a currency. So I'd never had thought about it in terms of how you can take social service or any kind of nonprofit and the purpose and fulfill the purpose of that nonprofit through using blockchain. That is phenomenal to me. That is really interesting. And so then what about the web development? What was it called? Flex web development? You
Yeah.
also have a certification in that?
Yeah, so the blockchain, and I did it because of the blockchain. So the blockchain has, you access the blockchain through coding, through a specific language. And so there's like an Ethereum language, there's an Ethereum platform that works on the blockchain. And that's the one that mostly does like transactional things without human involvement. So I just, for a project in my technology class, I coded a simple transaction in the blockchain. And then I thought, this is really interesting. I want to learn how to code.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a 6-month certification at Georgia Tech and learned how to code.
Wow.
With a bunch of 20-some-year-olds.
So what's next?
It was a lot of fun. And it's actually helped me in my current job because we can get stuff up quickly on our website. And then I can also embed stuff because I know how to code. I mean, you don't need to know much code to do that, but I can actually go in and
yeah. In a nonprofit, I've learned that it's every job is everybody's job. You can't delegate too much, as much as you can in a for-profit anyway. For those out there who may be aspiring to work in a nonprofit in a leadership role, what are the kinds of things that they should be focusing on in building or in doing to be able to achieve that kind of role?
Yeah. So nonprofit is a nonprofit business. And I think it's so everything that you would need for regular business skill sets, you need for a nonprofit. And I do think that that's there was a trend towards that because we have a lot of nonprofits have a lot of corporate folks on their boards. And so I think that nonprofits are moving towards that anyway. But I actually think there's just a lot to be gleaned from the business world. We have to recognize that we're not for profit. So our lens isn't the same, but the way we go about business needs to be the same. And I don't think that that's completely been front of mind in the past. It has been changing and trending towards that. But so anything for-profit business is an important skill for a nonprofit business. But I also think that nonprofit work, depending upon what type of work it is, it takes a very special person for longevity, right? So it's a marathon. It's not a race, right? A lot of burnout in nonprofit.
Yes, I bet.
And you really have to be driven by something because it is a lot of hours. And I know when I first started in nonprofit, there was some misconception that if I'm in nonprofit, I don't have to work as hard as if I was in corporate. No, I mean, it's almost like a lifestyle in nonprofit, and people really live and breathe their jobs. So it does take, I mean, I think if you want to be in nonprofit, you really have to feel like you're called to do something. There's something that speaks to you because it is a lot of hours and you are always under-resourced, and you have to be very creative, right? So you can make it, the beauty of nonprofit is you can make it whatever you want it to be. Sky's the limit, but you have to know how to hook up resources and do things for free and do things for cheap. And I've really been I've been very blessed to have a whole lot of people who've been supportive throughout my career who show up, when I need them. And private nonprofit partnerships are important. And leveraging other resources is important. So, yeah.
Yeah, you've mentioned several times the relationships that you've kept alive, the students who you helped to free from deportation, and the other people who have received scholarships perhaps and have gone on to higher things. It just seems like you've maintained a robust network of relationships, not for purposes of using them, but certainly they have, as you said, you've been fortunate enough to have surrounded yourself with people that have shown up just when you needed them. And so it certainly would help to, I would think, to have that network.
Yeah, and I think again the pandemic has helped put some of us back in touch.
Mm-hmm.
One of my former attorneys I just talked to yesterday, and I hadn't talked to in a long time, but she remembers my birthday every year.
Oh.
I don't know how, but it's just, and I told her how much that means. And she's doing great things in federal government now. But so we get busy. Everyone gets busy, and we lose contact with people, and then but you need to go back, to those people. And I think as you get older, and I longer in service, you start to really see those people who are just really good people, buena gente, and you just you need to make sure that you thank them and go back to them. And those are the people that when you're least expecting it, they'll check on you, or they'll send you a nice note. And maybe it's once a year, maybe it's not even that, but they're in your life, and you need to make sure that you give them what they need to.
Yes, exactly.
And that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
But the longer you're in this work, the easier it is to see the people who are in it also for the long haul, right? There are some people that will come in and out of your life, but there's some people who will always stay. And it's those people that we need to make sure we take care of as much as they're taking care of us.
Mm-hmm. And that's become so important during the pandemic. So
First question, and I bet everybody's thinking about it. Have you ever thought about running for political office?
I have, and I haven't run, but I've worked with a lot of people who have, and I've lifted up people who wanted to and have been successful. I've done a lot of work in public policy. I had the great pleasure in the Georgia General Assembly of working with Stacey Abrams on a number of initiatives throughout the time that we were both doing work in the Georgia General Assembly. Yeah.
Okay. Good deal. So I think you have some fans out here.
Tisha Tallman for governor.
Oh.
So Susan Hitchcock has a great question. Tell us, what are a couple of the most challenging leadership roles you've ever had?
Ooh, it's all challenging. It's all challenging. I mean, in all seriousness. And I think what's most challenging about nonprofit work is the operating on a shoestring, right? You can have all the greatest ideas in the world and the greatest motivation and intention, but unless you're resourced, they will never see the day of light. And so, connections, relationships become incredibly important. Supportive boards. My board now, it's the best board I've ever worked with. I've worked with some great people and some great boards, but cumulatively, my board is amazing, and they're all in service. And they have an amazing amount of expertise and experience in this area. But yeah, I mean, it's all challenging. I think I've had the great pleasure and the great challenge of leading organizations at pivotal points, right? So I think my skill set is very appealing to organizations that want to do something differently or go to the next level or start. So I've started a regional office. I've come in after decade of leadership and completely turned an organization in a different direction. And now with NAEHCY, I'm the first executive director. We've existed since the late 80s, but we've had a contractor model where all the employees have been contracted. So now we're starting a whole new phase of the organization with bringing folks in-house. and lifting up the organization internally and utilizing and leveraging all the expertise and experience of the board of directors. So it's all challenging work for sure.
Okay, great answer. The next question is, what kinds of challenges have you faced being a woman or a bi-ethnic person?
Yeah. Well, we're all almost all of us are women on this call. So I think we all know what the challenges are as women. I think there definitely been a lot of barriers just being a woman, and I'm of a generation that's a lot different than, for example, my daughter's generation, Generation Z. And I look at, I mean, there's a stark difference in how we're raised, how we're perceived, and how we've been integrated into society and not integrated into society. I see Amanda Gorman, the poet laureate, who delivered the poem on Wednesday. Amazing. And then I saw something recently of a 12-year-old girl who's going to be in the Olympics for skateboarding, Sky Brown. Amazing. And they're now living in a different world than we did. And they are in a more supportive societal and supportive familial situation. And I think that, Gen Zs in particular, I'm a Gen X, and there are very few of us Gen Xers. We're sandwiched between boomers and millennials that are just huge. So Gen Xers, I feel like we've been kind of a little bit sleepy, and Gen Z is like giving us all this energy. We're like, yes, take it and run. You're doing what I felt like I couldn't do, right? Because whether it was resources or societal barriers or whatever. So I really do think that, whatever barriers I may have encountered, that Gen Zs are making it easier for me to finish my career, right? To stay and finish, no matter what the barriers may have been. And certainly, my experience is Mexican American from the Midwest. And my Midwest experience, and I neglected to say that, I grew up in Iowa. And, I come on my mother's side, my aunts and uncles were migrant farm workers. And my first job was at 14 detasseling corn, but not as a migrant farm worker, as an Iowa teenager working the fields. So even my experience was very different. So yes, I mean, there are, I try to focus on the positive. That's like my new mantra, especially given the pandemic when all you see is negative, and we're certainly surrounded by that. But I do feel very hopeful, lifted, and inspired by this next generation, that they will have far less barriers than we did, and that we need to make sure we lift them up and provide them with the resources and the guidance that they need. And they want to go in and dismantle everything. I mean, I understand their feelings, but one of the things I think is so important is that we make sure they understand what we're living in now, and that they can change it. They can do whatever they want with it. It's going to be their world. But that we have created something that's worth understanding, and learn from that what should be changed.
Thank you. Our audience includes students, college students that are still in school, people who have just graduated, people who are in the middle of their careers, or maybe getting their first management positions. Also, people who are at the top of their game. We've got CEOs on this call, and we've got some people who have lost a job and are sitting here listening, thinking about their next step. So this question came in, and I think you could probably help us all with this. What's the biggest failure you've had, or biggest disappointment, and what did that teach you?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's a biggest failure. There are a lot of failures. And when I was a criminal prosecutor for 5 years, and I did felony and homicide work. And I used to, at the end of each day, there was a woman who sat at the front, and I walked out and I said, "Mary Ann, I quit." And she said, "See you tomorrow, Tisha." And every day I felt like a failure in that job, because, something didn't get right. But, I was working hundreds of cases at a time. So it's like, take this file, move it over, and now I can fail in something new tomorrow. And I mean, it's not literal, but you feel that way at times in your career, that it's like one thing after the next. And it might be small to one person, but to a person whose career is very important to them, everything feels like a failure almost, on some level, like not having enough time to do this. But I don't know if I've had a biggest failure. I think that I look back, I'm so thankful for this opportunity, because I get to think back on things. And I really truly believe you can't move forward if you're not thinking back and evaluating. Is that I think when you're younger, you sometimes don't value relationships as much as you do as you get older. And, you have a million things on your mind. Maybe, you have a young child and you're working a bazillion hours and you're in a relationship, whatever it is. But I think that just not taking the time to think things through and valuing relationships, every relationship, whatever that relationship is, and gaining understanding. I don't think I've always taken the time to gain understanding of everybody's individual situation. And I think that's kind of true of where we are as a nation too, is that we just somehow lost understanding and the appreciation of what everybody's going through. When one of my family members got really ill and is still ill, I was taking a flight, and the flight got really turbulent, and I was already stressed out. And I was coming back to Atlanta, and I just decided to get up. I got up and I went back to the stewardess, because I noticed that we were just hovering. We were going around in circles. We weren't doing anything. And so I went back and talked to a stewardess, and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, she was looking at her phone. She goes, "I don't know. We haven't got any word." And she showed me, she goes, "We're just moving around and nobody's told us yet what's going on." I said, "Wow." I said, it's very stressful." She's like, "It is for us too." And then I told her what was going on in my life. And she said, "Wow." She said, and then she told me about one of her family members who was going through the same thing. And she said, "You just never know." She goes, "I just, people just come in and out of the airplane, and you service them, but you really don't stop to think of what each person is going through right now and where they're going to, And so we both had this nice moment. It was very calming, and I sat back in my seat and I was calm for the rest of the flight. But I just think that's a really huge lesson of just every person you encounter, you have no idea what they're going through that day, that minute, or in their lives in general.
Well, thank you for that. That's a great story. Anybody else have any more questions? That's the end of the questions that we've gotten from the audience. It's a little different virtually when we're at the Commerce Club, which we hope to return to in the summer. We take a break after the presentation, and then the audience is there in person asking questions, and it's such a great environment. We miss the Commerce Club so much, but we'll be back. The vaccine's going to work, and we're going to be back in person, and we're looking forward to that. But yes. That's the end of the questions and answers.
There was one more. How can we give to NAEHCY? And I just want to make sure that we've addressed that one more time. Where can we donate to NAEHCY?
Yes, that let me cut and paste that. That was added to the chat earlier, and I'm
Okay,
just I'll put it in again. Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
All right, so we make sure we have that available to everybody. Well, so we always like to ask our guest presenter if there was one thing that you wanted to leave with everybody today based on all that you've spoken to and about. What would that one thing be that you would like to leave?
I think hope.
Hope.
I think hope is it's something that I keep going back to, and I've gone back to my whole career. And you know, when we are devoid of hope, whether individual, community, nation, then things go awry, and they go awry in a huge way.
Mm.
So I think it's so important to keep a pulse on people in our family, people in our communities, people in the country, that there is hope. And if there isn't hope, how do we create it? And how do we help people see it? Because hopelessness is a terrible thing to witness. And even in the communities that I've served that have every reason to be hopeless, there is not hopelessness. There is hope. And I think if we all continue with that in front of mind, that maybe the pandemic and maybe our day will be just a little bit easier.
Mm. Well, you've given us many reasons to hope today. So thank you very, very much. I keep thinking that this year has got to be the new year of hope, health, and healing. So hope is certainly absolutely incredibly important. All right, so well, thank you again, Tisha, for being with us today and sharing so much about yourself and what makes you, what propels you into what you do.
For NAEHCY with all of the links, and we'll send this to you after this presentation, along with the video of the presentation that you can share with other people. And would like to talk since we're at the beginning of the year, and we talked a lot about resilience. We do offer a turnkey 360 program that is amazing. All of us need to know where we stand in the eyes of our supervisors, peers, and our direct reports. It helps us in our leadership journey, and we would certainly love for you to reach out to us and let us help you with your 360s. Also, we are working a lot with inclusion, diversity, and equity, and we're in the middle of our first cohort right now of idea coaching, and I'm in the classroom myself, and it is amazing. It's changing the way I see everything. It is a really, really good class. We're going to kick off a second cohort in April. So please reach out to us, Tina Mantella at tmantella@turknet.com, and let us send you some more information about it. It is a wonderful opportunity. Learning things I didn't even know I needed to know. Our next meeting is in February. Is going to be removing internal and external challenges from underrepresented groups, a personal and professional perspective. It is going to be amazing, and I'm sure I'm saying her name wrong. Jiri
Nagino.
Okay. She is a wonderful speaker, and we'll be sending y'all out an invitation and a link to sign up, and we'd love to see you next month.
And Kathy, I just might add that Dr. Barbara Riley,
yes,
who is also a senior consultant executive coach here at TurkNet, is going to be facilitating that dialogue. And so it should be a very dynamic discussion with a dynamic duo.
Yeah, we're real excited about it. All these women at TurkNet. And then just want to encourage you to get social. Please subscribe to our monthly newsletter. See us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitter's a good thing now. And contact information. This is just our address and all that, and that will be on the what I send y'all after this meeting. But just want to thank y'all so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ann.
All right, then. So thank you again, Tisha, and thank you everybody for tuning in this morning, bright and early, with or without your pajamas. And certainly, please take advantage of the opportunities to support NAEHCY and our wonderful guests. So thank you again. Have a great day.